Oh, you know that feeling when you're alone in an unfamiliar place, and something just feels wrong? Like you are being watched. Like maybe you should not be there. I always thought that was just your brain playing tricks on you. Now I know better. And after you hear what happened to me, you might start paying attention to those feelings too. I'm a real estate photographer. You know, the person who makes those tiny apartments look spacious online. Yeah, that's me. I've been in hundreds of houses, mansions, starter homes, even places that should have been condemned years ago. Nothing ever bothered me. I was always the rational one, the one who laughed at ghost stories around campfires. That changed last summer when I took what should have been a routine job at an old Victorian on the edge of town. The place had been sitting on the market for years. It has peeling paint, a sagging porch, the whole haunted house vibe. But hey, a job is a job, right? The moment I unlocked the front door, something different. Have you ever walked into a room right after people were arguing, and you can feel that tension still hanging in the air? It was like that, but worse. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me. I shook it off and got to work. Room by room, click by click. The dusty parlor with its faded wallpaper. The kitchen with its ancient appliances. The formal dining room where no one had eaten for decades. But as I worked, this weird feeling kept nagging at me. Something about the dimensions wasn't adding up. See, when you photograph houses for a living, you develop a sense for space. And this house, it was hiding something. The second floor was where I noticed it first. The hallway had this strange bulge in one wall, creating an awkward corner that made no architectural sense. I ran my hand along the faded floral wallpaper, and I swear, I'm not making this up. I could feel the wall vibrate slightly, like something behind it was breathing. When I knocked, the sound was hollow. Different from every other wall in the house. Looking closer, I could just barely make out a seam running from floor to ceiling. Hidden by layers of wallpaper, but definitely there. A door. I took out my pocket knife and carefully scored along the edge. The paper peeled away like dead skin, revealing what was unmistakably a door frame. Look, I know what you're thinking. Don't go in the hidden room, you idiot. Trust me, I've yelled the same thing at horror movies. But there's something about discovering a secret that makes rational thought fly out the window. Haven't you ever been curious enough to do something you knew you probably shouldn't? I pushed the door, and it swung open with a sound like a long, slow exhale. The room beyond was perfect. Pristine. Unlike the rest of the decaying house, this room looked like it had been cleaned that morning. A small bedroom with soft blue walls. A neatly made bed with a handmade quilt. A writing desk positioned under the window. Curtains drawn but unwrinkled. But what made my blood freeze in my veins were the photographs that covered an entire wall. They were all of me. Not just recent photos. My entire life was there. Me learning to ride a bike with my dad steadying the seat. Me at 10, holding up the trophy from my first swim meet. My high school graduation. My college roommates and I on the night well, let's just say it wasn't a night my parents know about. Every significant moment of my life, captured and displayed in perfect chronological order. Photos that couldn't possibly exist in this house I'd never visited before. My hands shaking, I stepped closer to examine them. The most recent ones showed events from just weeks ago, my sister's wedding, my niece's birthday party. Then yesterday. This morning. Me pulling up to this very house. And then, photos that hadn't happened yet. Me discovering this room, which I was doing right now. Me backing away in horror. Me running down the stairs. The final photo showed me asleep in my own bed. But I wasn't alone. Something was standing over me. Something tall and thin with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Its face was mostly shadow, except for eyes that reflected light like a cat's, and a smile that stretched too wide for any human face. The photo was dated for tonight. I backed away, bumping into the desk. A leather-bound journal fell open, its pages yellow with age. As I watched in disbelief, ink began to form on the blank page, words writing themselves. I've been watching you your whole life. learning you, becoming you. Thank you for finally finding me. Now I can come home. The door behind me slammed shut. I spun around, lunging for it, but there was no handle on this side. No way out. I pounded on the walls, screaming for help. But who would hear me? The house had been empty for years. My phone showed no signal. And the windows weren't real. Just glass panes mounted to solid wall, showing a view that couldn't exist from this part of the house. As darkness fell, the room grew dimmer, but not dark. The photographs began to glow with a faint, sickly blue light. And in every single one, my face was changing. Features stretching, smile widening to impossible proportions, eyes growing darker until they were just empty pits. Whatever was in this room with me, whatever had been trapped here, it hadn't just been collecting my photographs. It had been collecting me. Pieces of my life. My experiences. My identity. It needed one last thing to be complete, my face. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember leaving the house. I woke up the next morning in my own bed, exactly like in the photograph. I might have convinced myself it was all a nightmare, except for two things. First, the key to the Victorian was still in my pocket. Second, my reflection doesn't quite match me anymore. It smiles when I don't. It blinks just a fraction of a second too late. Sometimes, when I'm very still, I swear I can see it studying me, like it's still learning. I called the real estate agency that day. They had no record of sending me to photograph any Victorian house. According to county records, the address I visited doesn't even exist. But I know what I saw. And I know something followed me home. I'm telling you this as a warning. If you ever find a space that shouldn't be there, a room that feels wrong, a door that shouldn't exist, just walk away. Because some things are hidden for a reason. And some rooms are forgotten because what's inside them should never be remembered. And if your reflection ever seems just a little bit off, don't look too closely. It might not be you looking back anymore.
You know, there's something inherently unsettling about public transportation late at night. That liminal space between destinations, the strangers sitting in silence, the dimly lit streets passing by outside the windows. Let me tell you what happened to me on one of those nights. It might make you think twice about taking that last bus to home. I hadn't planned on working so late. The coding project I was wrestling with had hit a snag, and before I knew it, the office had emptied out around me. By the time I finally packed up my laptop, it was nearly midnight. Rain pattered against the lobby windows as I stepped off the elevator. Heavy drops splashed from a dark sky, forming puddles that reflected the city's neon signs in broken, rippling colors. I sighed and pulled up my weather app. The storm wasn't letting up anytime soon. My car was in the garage, and rideshare prices were surging because of the weather. That left me with one option, the N92 night bus. It wasn't ideal, but it would get me home, or so I thought. I jogged to the bus stop, my thin jacket already soaked through by the time I reached the shelter. The schedule showed one more bus coming, the final run of the night at 12:15 a.m. I checked my watch, 12:10. I'd made it just in time. The headlights of the bus appeared through the curtain of rain, a ghostly glow that seemed to float toward me. It pulled up with a hydraulic sigh, water streaming from its roof in sheets. The doors folded open. I hesitated for just a moment. The interior lights were dimmer than usual, casting the bus in a sickly yellow glow. But it was that or walk 5 miles in the downpour. I stepped aboard, fumbling for my transit pass. The driver sat motionless, his face obscured by the shadow of his cap. I tapped my card and muttered a thanks that went completely unacknowledged. As I made my way down the aisle, I realized the bus wasn't empty, as I'd expected. Despite the late hour, at least a dozen passengers sat scattered throughout the vehicle. None of them looked up as I passed. None of them spoke or moved. An odd detail registered in my tired mind. Everyone was soaking wet. Their clothes clung to their bodies, hair plastered to their scalps, as if they'd been standing in the rain for hours. I found an empty seat about halfway back and slid in, placing my laptop bag on my lap. The bus lurched forward, wipers beating a hypnotic rhythm against the windshield. It took me a few minutes to notice what was wrong. The woman across the aisle hadn't blinked once since I'd sat down. She stared straight ahead, eyes unmoving, water still dripping from her chin. The businessman 2 rows up remained in exactly the same position, not shifting or adjusting as the bus swayed around corners. In fact, none of the passengers moved at all. Not to check phones, not to glance out the windows, not even to breathe. They weren't breathing. A chill that had nothing to do with my wet clothes crept up my spine. I looked more carefully at my fellow passengers now, really looking for the first time. Their skin had an unnatural pallor, tinged with blue around the lips and fingertips. One man's suit was torn at the shoulder, revealing what looked like road rash. A teenage girl's arm bent at an impossible angle. The elderly woman at the front had what appeared to be a trickle of dried blood from her temple disappearing into her hairline. My heartbeat quickened. I pulled out my phone to call someone. Anyone. No signal. Of course. I looked out the window, trying to recognize where we were. We should have turned onto Maple Avenue by now, but instead, the bus was heading down an unfamiliar road that curved alongside the river. In the wrong direction. "Excuse me," I called out to the driver, my voice sounding too loud in the silent bus. "I think we missed my stop." No response. I stood up, gripping the seats for balance as the bus picked up speed. "Hey, you missed the turn for Maple." Still nothing. I made my way to the front, passing the motionless passengers. Up close, their appearances were even more disturbing. Skin waxy, eyes glassy and fixed. When I reached the driver, I froze. The driver's cap had shifted, revealing his face in profile. Half of it was missing, crushed and distorted as if in a terrible accident. Yet somehow, impossibly, he continued to drive, hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. As if sensing my gaze, the driver slowly turned his head, the movement stiff and mechanical. His remaining eye fixed on me, the pupil dilated to an impossible size. "Last stop coming up," the driver said, his voice a wet, gurgling sound. "Everyone gets off at the last stop." That's when I noticed the route display above the windshield. It didn't show a street name or destination. It simply read, River Bottom. Panic exploded through me. I lunged for the door controls, but the bus swerved violently, throwing me against the fare box. Outside, through the rain-streaked windows, I could see we were approaching the Westfield Bridge, the old one that had collapsed during a flood 2 years ago and was never rebuilt. The one where a night bus had plunged into the river, killing everyone aboard. The doors wouldn't open. I pounded against them, screaming for help. Behind me, the passengers had finally moved, all turning their heads in unison to watch me, expressions blank. The driver accelerated, the engine roaring as we approached the edge where the bridge should have been. Everyone gets off at the last stop. The passengers intoned in perfect unison. Everyone joins the last ride. The bus went airborne. They found my laptop bag washed up on the riverbank 3 days later. My body was never recovered. But here's the strange thing. Transit authorities insist the N92 night route was discontinued years ago, after the bridge collapse. There is no 12:15 bus. Yet, every now and then, usually on rainy nights, people report seeing a bus with dimmed lights pulling up to the old stops along that route. No one has ever reported getting on. Maybe it's already full.
Have you ever received a text from someone and immediately felt something was off about it? That's what happened to me, and trust me, you'll want to check who's really sending your messages after hearing what I went through. Ellie had been my best friend since 6th grade, the kind of friendship where we finished each other's sentences and our parents considered us part of their families. We'd been through everything together, first crushes, family problems, college applications. We even planned to room together at State University in the fall. That's what made it so devastating when her car went off Mountain Pass Road 3 days after our high school graduation. The funeral was held on a Thursday. Closed casket. I sat in the front row between my parents and Ellie's mom, feeling hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just enough to keep breathing. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. It didn't feel real. She would have wanted you to have this, Ellie's mom had whispered after the service, pressing Ellie's favorite bracelet into my palm, a simple silver chain with a half-heart charm. Ellie had the other half. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom, the bracelet cold against my wrist, scrolling through old text conversations with Ellie. Our plans, our jokes, our secrets. All those words that would never get any new additions. It was just after midnight when my phone buzzed. New message from Ellie. I froze, staring at the notification. It had to be a mistake. Maybe a delayed message that hadn't gone through before. Or Ellie's parents using her phone. Something logical. I opened the message. Ellie wrote, "Olivia, I need your help." My hands trembled as I read the words. Another message appeared. Next message, "I don't think I'm dead." That's not possible, I whispered to my empty room. Ellie's message, "I can see you right now. You're wearing my bracelet." My gaze snapped up, scanning my darkened bedroom. The house was silent except for the distant sound of my parents' TV downstairs. With shaking fingers, I typed a response. My message, "Who is this? This isn't funny." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, and appeared again. Ellie's message, "Remember when we were 12 and broke your mom's vase? We blamed it on your cat and never told anyone. I never told anyone else, Olivia." The air in my room suddenly felt too thin. That was our secret, one we'd never shared with anyone. My message, "Ellie, how is this possible?" Ellie replied, "I don't know what happened." The crash, then darkness. Now I'm somewhere cold. I can see things, like I'm watching through windows sometimes. I can see you right now. I stood up, spinning around my room, checking the closet, under the bed, behind the curtains. Nothing. No one. I sent a message, "Where are you?" Ellie replied, "I don't know. It looks like. I think I'm at Wickham Cemetery, where they buried me. But something's wrong. I'm not supposed to be here." My heart hammered against my ribs. Wickham Cemetery was just a few miles away. Ellie's message, "Please, Olivia. I need you to come here. Something's holding me here and I can't get out." The rational part of my brain screamed that this was impossible, that someone was playing a cruel prank. But another part, the part that had known Ellie better than anyone, recognized something in those messages that no one could fake. So I replied, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." Sneaking out was easy. My parents were already asleep. The drive to Wickham Cemetery was the longest 15 minutes of my life. The messages from Ellie continued. Message, "Hurry." Next message, "I can feel something else here with me." Next one, "It knows you're coming." The last message came just as I pulled up to the cemetery gates. "Don't come inside." But it was too late. I was already pushing open the rusty iron gate, the beam of my phone flashlight cutting through the darkness. The cemetery was silent, rows of headstones casting long shadows across the overgrown grass. I made my way to Ellie's grave, the earth still fresh, flowers from the funeral beginning to wilt. My phone buzzed again. Ellie's message, "Olivia, turn around. Go home. I made a mistake." I froze, my breath visible in the suddenly cold air. Ellie's message, "It's not me texting you." "What?" I gasped, almost dropping my phone. Another message appeared. "It's using my phone. It wanted you to come here. I'm so sorry." I heard something then, a soft scraping sound, like fingernails on dirt. It was coming from beneath Ellie's grave. I took a step back, then another. My phone buzzed one final time. "Run." I turned and sprinted toward the gate, my phone's flashlight bouncing wildly across the gravestones. Behind me, the scraping grew louder, more frantic. I didn't look back, not even when I heard what sounded like earth splitting open. I reached my car, fumbling with my keys, the cemetery suddenly alive with whispers. As I finally got the engine started, my headlights illuminated a figure standing by Ellie's grave, a silhouette that looked like my friend, but wrong somehow, distorted. It raised a hand, waving with jerky, unnatural movements. I floored the accelerator, tires spinning on gravel before finding purchase. As I sped away, my phone buzzed one more time. With trembling hands, I glanced at it at the next stoplight. Unknown number, message, thank you for letting me out. The police searched Wickham Cemetery the next day after my frantic report. They found nothing unusual except Ellie's grave. The earth was undisturbed, but when they checked the casket just to be certain, it was empty. And somewhere in town, someone who looks almost, but not quite, like Ellie is sending text messages from a phone that should have been buried 3 days ago. I know this because I still get messages sometimes. They're becoming more frequent. And yesterday, I saw her, or whatever is pretending to be her, watching my house from across the street. I don't think I'll be going to State University in the fall anymore. I don't think I'll be safe anywhere.